Hey, what's up, Charlotte family? It's Charles here with JT, Executive Director. Hope you guys are doing good. Welcome back to another Hospice Live 101. We've been doing this over the last couple months, right now, JT? I think couple months, and it's been really great. We've been serving the Metroplex for over 20, almost 23 years now, and one of the things we've seen a lot is there's just not a lot of easy to understand hospice education. We do home health, we do hospice, we do personal care and veteran care throughout the Metroplex, but the word hospice is just super scary. And so, what we've done is just make it really easy and basically give scenarios of our patients that we've served over the last several years, switch their identity, right, for HIPAA purposes, and really just kind of help you understand their situation and then understand what a hospice is and what a hospice 101 is. And so, yeah, JT, it's been pretty fun to kind of walk families through this. I know we do hospice 101s all the time, and it's just great, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, when you hear that word first come from the doctor, from the hospital, a lot of times families wanna hear from someone from a hospice agency. And so whether it's a nurse that'll come out or a liaison, or someone like Charles or I, it's to kind of break that ice, that word first comes around. And so we started doing this, I think, in January or February this year, just to give, like you said, some real scenarios so that if you're on YouTube or LinkedIn right now with us, or maybe you're watching this back after we've recorded it, this is just a softer way to kind of get the conversation started because it's not an easy season.
yeah, 100%, 100%. Yeah. So with that said, we'll kind of get right into it. Thank you for hopping on and listening and watching, and hope this is super helpful for you guys. So, stats. We always like to talk about stats, JT, all the
Yeah.
data.
Yeah, we always, why is this important, or why is this, something we talk about? Hospice is a benefit that was created by Medicare, something you've paid into your whole life, or maybe a commercial insurance plan that has hospice sometimes, but it's designed to keep you safe at home, and to give you comfort and dignity, in this season. And so, about 2 million people get hospice every year, and only 50% use that benefit before they pass. And so, when you hear that word, we hear a lot of times, like families will say, oh, hospice, like he's got more than a week left,
Mm,
but it's designed for 6 months. And so, whether or not someone uses all 6 months or more than 6 months, there are just different signs that we'll talk about specifically today with COPD, but every diagnosis has different signs that may indicate that it's time for hospice. And so we know here in Plano, 50% of our population will be over 65 in 4 years in 2030. And so with that aging population, if you're a adult child of someone that's dealing with a chronic illness, or a spouse that is a primary caregiver, this is why we talk about and do what we do.
yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I think it's just like you said, JT, that a lot of people don't understand that benefit is theirs. It's their right to utilize it if they qualify, right? And so that's the biggest thing. So let's talk about a story. Miss Karen Mitchell. So this is like we talked about. We've been doing this real stories retold, and Miss Karen was a previous patient of ours, and she had COPD, and we're going to talk about her journey on to home health and how that worked with her and how she got better and went through therapy, nursing, but then as she continued to decline, the doctor said hospice. And so, what does that mean? And we're going to take you guys through her journey so that you can understand what it feels like and to walk through that specific that journey. So, yeah. Never stop running. Yeah. So Karen, she was a marathon runner. So that was the biggest thing with her is she loved to run marathons for decades. She met her husband at a charity run, accidentally joined the wrong running group, struggled to keep up with their pace. They raised two boys, three grandchildren, and grandma's races were like the talk of the dinner always, like over the years. And I think that's the biggest thing is, when every person has a story, every person has things that they enjoy and they love. And I think a lot of times, we see at the end of life, we don't lose that picture. You don't lose the picture of what they enjoyed and what they loved. And so, if you're not familiar with COPD, COPD is a chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. It's a condition where it damages the lungs. And so, swelling, irritation, inflammation in the airways, and it just becomes very, very hard to breathe. And so, approximately 1 in 8 adults over the age of 40 have COPD, which is it's kind of wild. It's insane. So yeah, JT.
Yeah, and then so what happens, with COPD is, you feel the effects like here with Miss Karen. She started feeling short of breath even when, she wasn't maybe exhausting herself the same way she used to. Sometimes we'll hear from families, it's more taxing to go to the bathroom or just do everyday things around the home. And so when a PCP or a pulmonologist hears these things, they potentially initiate home health care. And so what home health care looks like is rather than, constantly go see your doctor over and over, bring your oxygen tank in the car with you. It can be stressful for families. And so what home health's designed to do is be an extension of that doctor's care in the home. And so for our home health team, we have nurses, RNs and LVNs. We have PTs, OTs, STs, the therapy team that comes in and gives that comfort at home and that's some of that strengthening. But even still, there's some gaps in home health care where the family might not feel like they're getting everything that they need to feel like Karen is safe at home.
Yeah, and I think we've kind of alluded to this in a couple different podcasts and videos. Is that this is what insurance will cover, right? And so you have the nurse, you have the therapist, you have the team there, but they're not there all the time, right? And so their job is the clinical focus of care, right? The clinical education, the clinical needs for Karen for her COPD to keep her safe at home, to not go back and forth to the hospital. And home health is meant to do that. And it is a big help because a lot of times when someone is new to a diagnosis or they're not sure about what this new thing is, like how do you handle it? And that's where the experts of home health come into play to guide Karen through that, to help her through that process. And then the only thing that's kind of, with COPD, it just depends, right? She was doing really good, right? And she was getting therapy and nursing, but she had a couple setbacks, right? Breathing became more difficult for her as her disease progressed. And then more infections came into play as she went back and forth to the hospital. And it made her weaker and weaker and weaker. And this is where the pulmonologist sat down with her and her husband and was saying, this is something that you may want to consider. The core quality of life is not as good as it used to be. There is something called hospice, and that's where the pulmonologist recommended hospice and talked to her PCP as well. And I think that that's where we kind of sit in that moment of, if you're watching this for the first time, thanks for hopping on. For us, we've been doing this to kind of walk families through what is hospice and give stories like Karen, right? And so, when you hear the word hospice, JT, we sometimes we talk to families and the doctor just literally said hospice and then left the room and then wrote the order, and then they're like, what does this mean, right? Like, what does hospice entail? Like, now, is my wife going to die, right, tomorrow? And I think that's the hardest part, that we see. Would you say so?
Yeah, yeah, and sometimes we've even called families where the doctor didn't even tell them hospice care, and
Mhm.
a doctor last week told us like in all of their med school and all their training, like they learn how to save lives,
Yeah,
so they're not always comfortable or even like educated enough to walk someone through like the dying process or
yeah,
the end of life, like what do those 6 months or less look like, and so that's where our RNs and our medical director on from a hospice perspective kind of know how to guide a family through this time.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. And it's difficult because I think when you hear the word hospice, like we always like to say, because we're on the other side of it, right? And we have stories of families that that are now have a loved one that was on hospice years ago, and they reflect and say, wow, like this was such a great help. This was like I had support, I had guidance, I had someone I could reach out to, right? Like that could just guide me through what the next steps were. And I think when you think of hospice, there is support and there's comfort and there's quality of care. And so that's where we want to kind of break down the three areas that a lot of times that what hospice focuses on, where hospice happens, and when is hospice appropriate. So when you're thinking about hospice and what it focuses on, it's focusing on managing pain symptoms, emotional, spiritual support, supporting families, and honoring patients' wishes, right? And when you're thinking about where it happens, it could happen anywhere, right? Most of the time, it's the residents. So if Karen's at home, which is at home, she'd be taken care of at our house. If Karen doesn't, Karen and David, they're not sure if they want her to be at home and pass at home. It could be at an assisted living facility. Maybe they pay out of pocket for someone to be there, or a group home, or a skilled nursing facility. So it is how hospice happens. Hospice is not a place. It is an entity. It's a support group to kind of help families wherever they are. And then when is hospice appropriate? We talked about this now. There's clinical measures, which we'll go into a little bit more. But Karen got that news from the doctor and saying, okay, hey, I think you need to look into hospice because you may have 6 months or less to live based off of what they're seeing. Now, nobody knows, when someone will pass away. In hospice, a lot of times our nursing team and our clinical team, at the very, very end, they can kind of see their signs and symptoms of when someone may pass in a day or a week. They're not eating enough. They're having the respiratory rates are getting shallow and deep, and like all those things can kind of paint the picture, but nobody knows, right? And so this is more clinical predictions from the doctor saying, I think, your loved one has 6 months or less to live. The pulmonologist gave that information to Karen. And then now Karen's like, all right, what do we do? And so these are the three core parts. JT, if you want to run through this, these are three core parts of hospice.
For sure. Yeah. So for hospice, we like to talk about the who first and then the what that comes with hospice. And so the who is what we alluded to a little earlier. There's a nurse that'll be the primary case manager. Charles calls her the quarterback. And
Hmm.
so that nurse is the one that is at the bedside at least one time a week, and is there to uh, kind of educate on the disease process, manage any changes in, you know, breathe it for this example, breathing, if it's something on their skin, if it's something in their appetite. They're working closely with a medical director to educate the family on, what's happening at home. And then they have a CNA or an aide that is there working closely with the nurse, can be there up to 5 times a week to help with bathing, grooming, keeping the patient comfortable. And then on the other side, that's the clinical team. On the other side, we have our spiritual team or our social team, and so that's our chaplain and social worker. And so the chaplain, sometimes it looks like religion,
Hmm.
sometimes it's playing cards, or telling stories, but the chaplain is there to um, support the patient, emotionally as any way they can. And then the social worker does a lot of that, but also helps with end of life arrangements. DNRs are a big topic with hospice care.
Hmm.
Having a will in place, having a medical power of attorney, all these things that, especially if it's a new diagnosis that comes on quickly, they haven't maybe thought about these things over time. And so
Hmm.
that is the whole team that comes around the patient at home to focus on. Like, with COPD, it's a cycle of a flare up, ER,
Hmm.
hospital, back home, flare up. And
Hmm.
so the question is, like, at 2 a.m., when you get shortness of breath or that air hunger, um, like, who do you call? You call your
Yeah.
hospice team. The nurse can come out, see you at home. You don't have to get in the car, get in an ambulance, go to the ER for symptoms that the team can treat at home.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I think, when you look at the care team, that care team, we talked about the air hunger or oxygen and kind of DME. And so, when we're looking at medications, that nurse will also come out and review like all the medications. And so there's hospice covered meds that hospice will cover, and then there's non-covered meds. So the best nurses, what they do in the best hospices, they will go through all the current medications, reconcile them. A lot of times we see that the pulmonologist ordered something, the cardiologist ordered something, the PCP ordered something, the urologist ordered something, right? The endocrinologist ordered something. All the ologists ordered something, right? And so a lot of times it's beautiful because now the nurse can kind of look at everything, reconcile those meds, and with a good collaboration with David, who's Karen's husband, and say, hey, based off of what we're seeing, I think this med, we can actually, DC this med. I think it's not something that's going to help her with her quality of life. Let's go ahead and DC this med. Let's triage this med. Let's maybe increase here. And it's a beautiful collaboration. And on top of that, depending on the hospice, a lot of times they will drop ship all those meds to the house. And so instead of them going to your local CVS or Costco, you go to Costco and you end up, getting something to eat when you shouldn't have gotten something to eat, right? Some a hot dog or something, right? But you don't have to worry about that now. And hospice kind of coordinates all those meds, and it kind of takes the burden. It doesn't take everything off of the responsibility of the family, but it does alleviate some of those pain points of what is this, or is this med going this day, right? And it's just super helpful for families. And so that's the one of the other what. So the who care team, then we got medications, and then DME. Did you want to walk through DME?
Yeah. The DME is the durable medical equipment, and then supplies, similar, but wipes, gloves, incontinence care, so underpads, chucks when a patient becomes incontinent, and then a hospital bed, the same bed that they can raise and lower in the hospital can come to your house. So you can see the little bedside table in this
Yeah,
graphic too. That can be good for patients to have, and then oxygen, wheelchairs, walkers, all of these things, because it's covered under that same Part A of Medicare that the hospital is. We like to say it's kind of like bringing the hospital home,
yeah,
where all the equipment that you're used to at the hospital that keeps you or makes you feel safe there is now in your own bedroom.
yeah,
So
yeah, 100%. And I think the biggest thing, it's like it's hard to get DME outside of Part A. So when you think about when you're in the hospital, you can get a whole bunch of DME, right? Hospital bed, everything. So that Part A really handles a lot of those equipment. So when they're hospice, that's where the DME comes into play to really help with a lot of these needs. Now, if you're wanting a Cadillac of the hospital bed, if you want like a really nice walker, if you want like the best of the best, remember, this is what Medicare is giving you. So it's sometimes it will be nice, sometimes it won't be nice, right? So I think it's also a reminder for families to say, hey, this is utilize as much as you can of what Medicare will give you, so you don't have to pay out of pocket. Now, if you want something higher, then a lot of hospices will say, yeah, feel free to go to the local DME and get a nicer walker, a nicer rollator. It's definitely families' options to do that, and we have lots of families who want to do that as well. So, so we're after understanding this, Karen now understands what hospice is. This is a great kind of step by step, 4 simple steps to kind of know, okay, what is hospice? Where do we go from here? Right. So step one is recognizing it may be time. And that is where in Karen and David's life, they had home health. They started going back and forth to the hospital several times, and her quality was just getting worse. She wasn't able to do what she used to love. It was very hard for her to even sit at the dinner table and hold a conversation with the grandkids about her running the marathons, right? She couldn't even do any of that anymore. That quality was decreasing. Second step is now the pulmonologist is saying, hey, you need hospice, right? And so now this third step is, okay, finding the right hospice, right? There's so many hospices in everywhere in the nation, in your area. Take time, if you have the time, take time. A lot of times the doctor may recommend a hospice, right? Or a social worker may say, hey, here are 3 hospices. It's always good to reach out to them, interview them, get to know them, The best hospices will do something like this, a hospice 101, and kind of chat with you and help you understand. You get a feel of the agency, you get a feel of their core values. Not every chicken is the same, right? We talk about Popeye's chicken and Chick-fil-A chicken. It's just the way that the agencies are run is a little bit differently. So it's good to make sure you take the time to find the best fit. And also, no hospice is perfect because it is, a business, right? So just know that it's very important to know that. And then admission and care begins. And so we talked about this earlier, the qualifications. So you've got these little emojis or cartoons to reflect the clinical LCDs, the local coverage determinants of hospice, what clinically allows for someone to be on hospice. In Karen's case, she had COPD, and so all of her measures, oxygen, shortness of breath, quality of life, all these clinicals that the doctor, the pulmonologist is showing would qualify her for hospice care. And then you have other areas, right? You have cardiovascular, you have Alzheimer's, dementia, right? You have cancer, you have several different areas. In those areas, those qualifications have to be met in order for someone to receive hospice, because not anyone can qualify for hospice. And that's a really big thing. And not only that, a lot of patients throughout the world or throughout the United States will be on hospice and then actually get better. So like they could get better and then they can come off of hospice because nobody knows what will happen. And that sometimes does happen where the qualifications is not met. And, one of the things, JT, you were alluding to is the payer, right? So who pays for hospice?
Yeah, yeah, all the things we talked about, the who and the what, are covered under Medicare Part A. And so, um, there is, you were talking earlier about like the responsibilities of the family, that burden is lifted from them,
Hmm.
but not 100%. There is still a responsibility for a primary caregiver to be there unless they're in an assisted living or a group home, both of which are also not covered by Medicare.
Hmm.
So that's, we talked about the gaps on home health. While the gaps are definitely much smaller on hospice, there is still, like, if an aide is there once a day for 30 minutes, there's still several more hours of the day that someone needs to be attended to and checked in on. And so
Yeah.
this is where the social worker, especially because everyone's journey on hospice looks different. The day you admit to 3 months in to 6 months in looks a lot different. And so initially, a family may say, we want this to happen at home. We have, spouse, two adult children live down the street. We'll set up a good game plan, and that definitely, we've seen that work all the way to the end. But we've
Yeah.
also seen where, they'll call the social worker and say, we can't handle this at home anymore. Like, what are our options? And that's where you can talk about a group home, you can talk about an assisted living, or hiring someone to come out
Yeah.
as like a bedside caregiver. That's what we call personal care, which we're not going to talk about today. But
Mm.
um, the true clinical and the who and the what we talked about, that is all 100% covered underneath Medicare Part A.
Mm.
And people don't always realize how much they can get from Medicare for that.
Right, right. Yeah, 100%. Kind of like talking about those pillars of the gaps. We talked about, Karen, she had home health, right, for a while. And then, let's say she needed some help in between home health, like someone to come and sit with her because maybe David was out on work. And, that's where the personal care side comes into play, where they would pay out of pocket. And then the palliative care side would be she would be on home health and she would maybe go to outpatient palliative care to continue to seek aggressive treatment. And so that there's not the benefit of the Medicare Part A like it is on hospice, but she still wants to see her doctor. She still wants to go and do aggressive treatment. She's still fighting. That's where that palliative care mindset comes into play, and it's awesome. It's a great help for families. And then once you get to that point where okay, we've done everything we can. Let's just enjoy the days while we have each day, and that's where hospice kind of comes into play, and to really keep her safe at home, to have the support that she needs, and that's where all that equipment and supplies really come into play to keep her safe at home, and that's kind of where she's at now. And so, her being on hospice and hospice at home now, she has a nurse, now she has an aide, a chaplain, she's receiving her oxygen. She's getting all the DME that she needs. The grandchildren come out. The nurse is there to support David with questions, and even her with questions. And now she's there, and just enjoying her days, right? Still enjoying life. Doesn't mean she's like at home all the time. Like, she could still go right to the park, right? Go with her grandchildren, like enjoy life. And I think a lot of times hospice looks so different when you have a good understanding. But then as she continues to decline, knowing that there's support, knowing that there's someone there to be able to say, okay, hey, this is the changes that I see in Karen today, just to be aware this is what may come in the next couple of days. That knowledge brings peace of mind, to families, and
Yeah.
and helping them know that. So
Yeah, it is beautiful over the 23 years. There's so many stories, and every you talked
yeah,
earlier about like we believe in honoring every story of every patient. We could have two patients, both COPD, same age, same hometown, but their lives,
yeah,
it's 70, 80, 90 years of experiences and stories. And so our nurses, our team, our chaplain, our volunteers, they all get to hear all these stories over the
yeah.
years and see pictures just like this one, where there's whatever she has done, Miss Karen, her whole life. She is honored by our team, and then
Mhm.
also all the family that's around her, the community. We've had patients where their friends will show up for a visit, and there'll be like 5 friends sitting
Yeah,
around just talking with them. So,
yeah, yeah,
um, it is pretty cool to see that way. We did
yeah.
get one question, Charles,
Mm.
about COPD. What is air hunger? Is what somebody asked.
Yeah, air hunger, it's difficult because when we talked about, let me see if we can go back to that slide on COPD, to kind of help. So when you're looking at COPD, the actual disease, right? It damages several parts of the lungs, right? And so with that damage, there's swelling, there's irritation, there's inflammation. And so a lot of times, if you're not breathing appropriately, there's a technique called pursed lip breathing. So it's like it's getting breaths through as much as possible. But sometimes your body can feel like you're not getting enough oxygen, and you start cycling that, and you start uncontrollable breathing, right? And so when you're breathing faster and you're breathing more, your anxiety increases, right? You're not going back to those techniques that the respiratory therapist or the PT or the OT may teach you. You start getting air hungry, and then the anxiety comes into play. And so a lot of times we hear that with COPD patients is you're constantly trying to gasp for air, right? And so a lot of the techniques that home health will teach patients, and also hospice will teach patients, is that pursed breathing, taking it one step at a time, controlling your rate of talking too. Because a lot of times you'll go ahead and say a couple words, and then you haven't taken your breaths while you're talking, and then so you have to catch up. And so it's a very difficult disease, especially at the end. And so that air hunger is constantly trying to get air on top of getting oxygen. So it's difficult, right? And so, but having that clinical support from home health or from the hospice team really can kind of decrease that anxiety as well. So
Yeah, and that we get that, phone calls 24/7. Hospice is on call with a nurse. And so if it is 2, 3, 4 in the morning, you don't want to call 911. And
yeah.
there's some of that going on. The nurse can just even over the phone help a family kind of get some peace. So
Mhm.
yeah, thanks.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Great question. Yeah. No, it's been it is a difficult, hospice is a very difficult conversation. Whether it is something that you are already prepared for, your grandma's 110, and everyone's been like, wow, she's still with us, and then she's on hospice, right? Or you have someone who's been on hospice for like a year, and you're like, what is going on? Like, what? Why? You kind of have almost like a guilt of like, why is grandma still here? I thought she was, like, there's so many things. There's so many things at hospice, that those emotional roller coasters, and I think that's why it's so important to have a company, a nurse, a team that can kind of guide you through that emotional roller coaster, chaplain, social worker, and if you qualify, it's good to to move that direction as soon as possible so that you can get that extra support because it is your right. So, but yeah, any final words, JT, you could think of?
No, yeah, thank you everyone hopping on this Tuesday afternoon. Feel free to click on our YouTube or our LinkedIn page. We've talked about other diagnoses too, dementia,
Yep.
ALS, other things that you or your loved one may be experiencing. But Charles talked about it earlier. It's your choice to pursue hospice, to pick the agency.
Yep.
So Google and TikTok and all the digital platforms are such a good resource for families to do their research and to look into it and kind of help through this season. So if you do want to talk to us, feel free to go to hospice.charlin.org. You can book a call with someone from our team to do exactly what we just did, and talk about your loved one's story, or call our office 24/7. So.
Yep. Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for hopping on, everybody. See you guys soon next week, if not sooner. God bless.